So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Liz Truss sent in to stop a trade war. Now, number 10 fears she could start one, which is ironic given that, number 10 obviously have to back the approach, otherwise they could have told her to back down, or, Johnson would have sacked her. But neither of those things happened. Johnson is the executive after all. This comes off the back of Johnson appearing to back away from threatening to scrap the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is something given the last week that we've had. So this article from the 14th of May, very recent, just off the weekend, depending on when this gets published. Johnson called Micheál Martin, the Irish Prime Minister, last week. He tried to break the ice with humour, saying, "I haven't seen you since your men thrashed us at Twickenham," the PM remarked. The Taoiseach, another rugby fan, was generous in return, saying, "It really wasn't fair. You only had 14 men on the pitch most of the time, and I know nothing about rugby, so I'll let those two debate that." On Tuesday, Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, will publish domestic legislation giving the government the right to suspend elements of the Northern Ireland Protocol to lift the check. So essentially this will be the thing that breaches international law once it's used, if it's used. It's kind of like the Internal Market Bill, or what the Internal Market Bill was envisioned to be. But essentially the law will give the power for two ministers to break international law. It just depends if it's used. The EU have threatened to retaliate with a trade war if the legislation was ever used, and that's the key bit there. Essentially what the take the British government are going with, they're going to put a gun on the table and they're going to threaten the EU, but they're not going to use it, and that's kind of the take they're going with. What is super ironic is that the Foreign Secretary will publish the domestic legislation. It's meant to be on Tuesday, right? Tuesday of this week, which will be the 17th. What is ironic is that, according to this article here, that Whitehall insiders say that any legislation on the issue regarding the Northern Ireland Protocol changes is some way off, with nothing yet presented to Cabinet. So this idea that it's going to appear on Tuesday seems unlikely, but we are in the midst of a briefing war between Liz Truss and effectively the rest of the Cabinet. She's going after the Prime Minister, she's going after the Michael Gove, she's going after Rishi Sunak. So this is Liz Truss' big gambit to become Prime Minister. On Tuesday, Truss, the Foreign Secretary, published the legislation. We'll see if that happens. I'll cover it if it does. The US threatened to retaliate with a trade war if it's ever used, similar to the Internal Market Bill. Yet after a week of sound and fury in which another confrontation with Brussels overshadowed the Queen's speech because the legislation to override the protocol, at least the talks about it, was supposed to be in the Queen's speech, because in the Queen's speech the government are meant to set out their legislative agenda for the next Parliament. They didn't mention the Northern Ireland Protocol. And the mixed messages about it emanating from the government, the tone of Johnson's call with Micheál Martin was conciliatory. The Prime Minister does not want a war with the EU, a senior ally said. So I don't know if that's a senior ally to Johnson or to Micheál Martin, but evidently, whoever has said this believes Johnson doesn't want a trade war with the EU, which makes sense. That's why he sent Liz Truss out there, to make her look stupid. But what she's trying to do is endear herself to the ERG group of the Tory party anyway, so, they're both losers in a sense, but you can see the bits here, the mixed messages about it emanating from the government. So the government have obviously started this briefing war, starting with Liz Truss talking about the legislation will be ready, all this stuff. We're going to trigger Article 16, we're going to scrap the protocol, blah blah blah. None of this has come through via legislation. They haven't put anything to the Commons yet. They took it out of the Queen's speech for a reason. That's because I don't think it's high on their legislative agenda. I think they did it to kind of signal to the DUP that we're on your side, we're going to deal with this, in the hopes that the DUP would go to the executive and allow Stormont to be opened. It's hard to read into these things because there's so many different things that could apply here, but the Prime Minister doesn't want a trade war. Evidently, I don't think Liz Truss wants a trade war, but she wants to have the image of someone who's ready to start that, if that makes sense. There is ill-disguised fury in some parts of Number 10 that Truss and David Canzini, the Deputy Chief of Staff, are so privately gung-ho about a confrontation with the EU, which, again, the top 15 trading partners the UK have, right, are the vast majority of my EU countries, apart from China, Japan and the US. That's it. The rest of the 15 are EU members. So in a trade war, we'll lose really quickly for multiple reasons, but that'll be one of them. One senior official said the object of the exercise with some people seems to be to have a fight, and that's what they're looking for. I don't know much about Canzini, but Liz Truss is looking for a fight because she's looking to be, she's Mrs. Brexit. She's going to be the one that fights with the EU and wins. The objective of the exercise for the Prime Minister is to restore the democratic process. process in Northern Ireland. But the thing is, the only way you can do that is to get the DUP to, take up their seats in Stormont. But the DUP have said they're not going to do that unless the protocol is scrapped. If somehow you convince the DUP to go back to Stormont, they look like bigger idiots than they already look like. They already look like huge idiots now. They're looking like the undemocratic Unionist Party. They're saying we want a weapon on the table, we don't want to use it. It's like having a nuclear deterrent. The Prime Minister does not want to use his nuclear weapons. Whatever the knuckleheads tell him, the knuckleheads implied to be, the ERG group, probably Mogg, Braverman, Truss, Brexit hardman Steve Baker, those sorts of people, I'm assuming. But this argument of this is not how you negotiate with, nation states, how you negotiate with people who you're meant to see as, friends or at least allies. By threatening them with a gun, as a nuclear deterrent, it doesn't make sense. Sources in both Downing Street and the Foreign Office stressed that it could take a year to change the law. So all of this talk about, we're ready to go next week, it's rubbish. This is bluster, but I can't figure out the end game of it. That's the problem. Unless there's another feint to see what the EU are doing, it could take a year. It could get blocked by the Lords realistically, because the government has no mandate to scrap the Northern Ireland Protocol. They had a mandate to implement it, but not one to scrap it, because they'd have to go back to the people for that. It's not in their manifesto. The bill itself will not be tabled for a couple of weeks, and then the first and second readings will follow almost immediately. However, passing the bill and using its provisions are different things. Obviously, the House of Lords can delay this bill significantly as well. There is little sign the EU is in the mood to compromise, because they don't have to, and even then they have compromised on certain things with medication, with agri-foods, etc. There have been certain things that have been changed to allow the protocol to work better. When Lord Frost took unilateral actions, the EU didn't actually punish the UK, which they could have done. A call between Truss and Šefčovič, the EU's negotiator, at 8 a.m. on last Thursday, which would have been the 12th, were described as frosty and tetchy. We'll talk about those in a separate one. I've got those loaded up somewhere. Parts of the protocol are working, she said. We need to change it. That's the reality, Truss said to aides before the call. In a previous conversation, she told Šefčovič, nothing we are suggesting will cost the EU any more at all. What's not to like? And I think the thing is, right, it depends on what the proposals that she's pushing are, because the command paper's a joke. We know that. They talk about green lanes and red lanes. The problem is the EU were going to set up a trust the trader scheme with the UK. The problem was that the UK kept unilaterally changing it and adding different companies to it. And that's a huge problem, because you can't create a trusted trader scheme like that. So, the idea that the certain changes they're going to make don't make sense. It's listed below, and we'll go through each one of them. Šefčovič said you signed up to the protocol, which is true. It's far easier to change something during the negotiation process than it is when it's signed into law. When she got the job last December, Truss told officials there's a landing zone if the EU are willing to flex. I don't know if she means be flexible, because flexing on people is the opposite of, sort of negotiating with them. But yeah, at a second meeting at Carlton Gardens in February 11th, Šefčovič continued to insist no changes to the protocol would be permitted. Šefčovič constantly argues he does not have a mandate to change these things, which he arguably doesn't. He really doesn't. Under the plans drawn up by Truss, the legislation does 6 key things. Now, it's interesting because Cabinet have not actually seen this, apparently. Whitehall insiders say any legislation on the issue somewhere off with nothing presented to Cabinet. So is this stuff she's already presented to Cabinet, or is she going to present them? And if she's going to present them to Cabinet, how does the press know about this, considering these 2 articles were written literally within hours of each other, right? So this one was written, Saturday the 14th of May, 6 p.m. British summertime it was published. This one was published at 11:30. So this article actually came out later than this one. So this idea that Cabinet officials actually know or are aware exactly of the legislation doesn't make sense, because apparently nothing's been presented to them. And if we actually look at some of these, right, 1 or 2 of them are okay, but the rest are really bad. So she talks about deals with customs delays by creating a green lane for registered trusted traders for sending goods just to Northern Ireland, which isn't going to happen, which we've explained before on the channel, which is that the UK and EU tried to set up a trusted trader scheme. The problem is the UK kept changing it, so it didn't work. And they want to set up a red lane for those products that might go to Ireland, with the latter subjected to full EU checks. And a trusted trader scheme could have worked had the UK not messed around and found out. Impose higher penalties on firms who break the rules and smuggle goods into Ireland. How are you going to know which ones are smuggling and which ones aren't? Like, no, that's not going to work. Includes measures to allow firms to produce goods to UK standards in Northern Ireland. That's not going to work either, because Northern Ireland are in the EU single market for goods. So producing goods to UK standards in Northern Ireland, if they're manufactured in Northern Ireland, they'd have to be to the EU standard, not to the UK standard, because goods manufactured in Northern Ireland could go to Ireland, could go anywhere in the EU single market. Put governance of the borders in the hands of UK court rather than European Court of Justice. I mean, that's never going to fly. That's just not going to happen. Especially when the UK can change domestic laws, can suspend bits of the protocol and have that be legal under UK law, but not international law. So again, that's not going to happen. This is the one that could happen in yellow. Give the Chancellor the right to change tax rates to allow the same VAT cuts in Northern Ireland as in the rest of the country. That one's possible, because it wouldn't give Northern Ireland a huge advantage, given that certain EU countries, I think Ireland actually has lower VAT on certain goods than GB does. So that's the only one I think that could be doable. Includes an explicit pledge that Britain would never install any border infrastructure between Northern Ireland and the Republic. I mean, that's not going to happen, I think, because of the Good Friday Agreement, and if you start putting up border posts, they're going to get shot by the IRA most likely. And from what I've heard, PSNI, the Northern Irish Police Force, said they will not police these border posts, because their police officers will get targeted. British officials stress that the UK has already set up a computer system. I was going to cover this a week or two ago, but I just kind of missed out on it, so I'm glad it's kind of back in. So the idea is the UK have set up some sort of IT system, right, that allows us to see what goods are flowing between GB and NI in real time. The EU have said the system's not good enough, and the UK blamed the EU for not taking up the offer to access the database, which sounds like a load of rubbish, purely because the EU have asked for more access to British data on goods movements, but the UK never provided it. So now suddenly the UK have a already working IT system. It doesn't make sense, especially given the fact that we know the UK has a history of problems with IT systems. Look at the systems in Dover. They didn't work. They went down. The GVMS system went down for like a few days, and it caused absolute havoc at the border. More havoc at the border. It's a load of rubbish. There are only two ways of changing the status quo. One, this from a government source. One is an international treaty, and the other is domestic. That's not true, though. You can't change an international treaty via domestic law like this. That's called breaching international law. They said it's the Sherlock Holmes thing. If you rule out everything else, what's left must be the answer. It's not always true, though, is it? You're left with domestic law. What if you don't have all the pieces? So when you rule out everything else, if you don't have the actual answer, you're not going to be able to figure it out. Clearly they have not watched anything to do with Sherlock Holmes at all. They need to go back to detective school. You're left with domestic law. We're not scrapping the protocol. We are acting domestically to fix it, but you are scrapping the protocol if you're doing that in a sense. You are getting rid of key bits of it, scrapping key parts of the protocol. So again, this is just a load of rubbish. While there are highly mixed messages emanating from government about whether these laws should ever be used, the plan is expected to be signed off by Cabinet Committee tomorrow. How could it be signed off by the Cabinet Committee when the Cabinet are apparently saying they haven't even seen the draft legislation? It doesn't make sense. There is no other plan, a Cabinet Minister noted, is expected to unnerve many. Sunak and Gove apparently not happy with this, and Cabinet is split on it. Gove, formerly the point man with Šefčovič. You got to feel bad for Šefčovič, to be honest with you. He's had to deal with Michael Gove, Lord Frost, and Liz Truss. You got to feel for the geezer a bit. So Gove is against unilateral action by the looks of it. The Cabinet Office also commissioned Treasury officials to draw up kind of risk analysis to figure out what could happen. Which sectors are vulnerable to an EU trade war, which is probably the vast majority. I mean, we don't have to put tariffs on EU goods. We might fall out with the WTO at that point, but we don't have to, and neither do we have the facilities to do that, especially because it will push up, the cost of living tremendously. But a trade war with the EU will kill our exports, that's for sure. That's for absolute damn sure. Even late last week, Sunak sent back some of the work because it was not up to scratch, which is crazy that, apparently that he wants extremely detailed reports. He's a convicted, not convicted, he is a conviction Brexiteer, but his job is to present the Prime Minister with worst case scenarios. Worst case scenarios are sanctions. when inflation is running where it is and interest rates are rising and the economy has begun to shrink, adding a potentially damaging trade war is not ideal. And the kind of British position on this is, well, if the EU, ban British exports or put tariffs on British exports, that's going to push up the cost of living for people in the EU and make it worse for them. So why would they do that? Why would they go against their best interests? And we've heard these arguments before, really, haven't we? When it came to why won't the EU, keep us in the single market? Why can't we keep all the benefits of the single market and the customs union without being able to do trade deals with other countries? And that by the EU kind of sticking tariffs or non-tariff barriers on UK goods, they hurt themselves. Why would they do that? It's because the EU's a project. That's why. And the project comes before everything else. While immediate retaliation is possible, officials, this is a load of rubbish in my opinion. Officials point out that there is a 9-month grace period between the implementation of rules which contravene a Brexit deal and the EU being able to bring legal action. So essentially they're saying we're good for 9 months, that within 9 months the EU won't be able to do anything because that's how long legal action will take, which, this doesn't have to go to court. The EU can suspend the protocol if they want it. Not the protocol, the trade and cooperation agreement if they want to. I think it'd be either the Commission or the Parliament that would deal with it. It would not necessarily have to go to court. I think they went to court last time just to make it more official, but it doesn't have to go to court. The hope is that these new plans are shown to work and no threat to the single market before that happens. But the problem is, right, what happens when we start buying in goods from countries that don't have the stringent regulations to us and we haven't checked them properly? That's a key problem, especially with our trade deal with Australia, for example. This bit here is rubbish. It won't take 9 months. It could be very quick. It could be within weeks. The EU Parliament could suspend the protocol with the trade agreement very quickly. Sources say Frost believe the conditions have been met to take unilateral action. We'll talk more about Frost because every time he keeps chiming in, he keeps talking absolute rubbish. Frost says the conditions have been met to take unilateral action at the end of last year, but Frost pulled out because he thought Boris Johnson would bluster and bottle it at the first sign of gunfire, which he basically has done, because the EU have once again said we're not going to budge on this. And evidently, by the looks of it, Boris Johnson's caved on it again. If you believe what's been put in this article, again, it's hard to know until more time has passed, but it doesn't look promising. That's David Canzini there. Johnson and his Chancellor have been locked all week in a series of intense one-on-ones, thrashing out their options. They plan to make an intervention before the summer recess at the end of July. Anyone who was in those meetings who thinks they know what's going on is lying, said a number 10 insider. So apparently they are kind of gaming this out, trying to figure out what could possibly happen here. And the kind of there are a few different scenarios. One is the EU do nothing, which I don't think will happen. Another is the EU just set up, just increase the amount of checks that happen, the physical checks that happen in the points of entry for EU goods, and just cause massive, huge tailbacks in Dover, etc. Like much bigger ones. I think only a third of British goods are checked. What happens when they kick that up to 50, 60 or 70%? What happens then? So that could be one option. Another one would be tariffs, so suspending the trade and cooperation agreement. So I think some of the tariffs range from between 5 and 40% depending on the goods. It's not great. That's going to kill British exports even more than they're already dead. The final one that could happen, which I'm not sure is going to happen, is sanctions. So they could essentially stop all imports and exports to the UK, which would be a disaster given the cost of living crisis. So hopefully they factored in sanctions into whatever they're gaming this out with, because that would be an absolute disaster for everyone in this country, honestly. It'd be bad for the EU, no doubt, but it'd be far worse for the UK given how reliant we are on the EU for exports to the UK, and also the fact that, again, is people they're not realising this in the UK. The EU is much bigger, yes, but it has a lot more access to a lot of different countries. Some of these countries are agricultural powers that can try and fill up the gap for UK exports. They might not be able to fill the full gap of UK exports to the EU, but they can try. And that'll be far less damaging than the situation in the UK if we fall out into a trade war, if that makes sense. But the challenge facing the Tories after a big loss in the local election, especially with a couple of by-elections coming up with Tractor MP, means baubles are now needed not just for the fabled red wall in the north, but to prop up Johnson's shrinking vote in the south. So essentially they're saying Johnson can no longer just try to keep appealing to the red wall. He's got to appeal for his core voters as well. Johnson's pivot of keeping the votes in the south whilst grabbing the votes in the north isn't working anymore. Sunak, they're saying Sunak has to be more effective than Gordon Brown. So essentially, he has to be more socialist. He's got to be more fiscally liberal than Gordon Brown was, which, for a Conservative Chancellor to have to do that is madness. And he has to save the world and then get the credit for it, which, if he's smart, if he does the marketing right, he can. But the thing is, he's a Thatcherite, isn't he? He doesn't believe in the furlough scheme. He doesn't believe in all the business of what he had to do during the pandemic. Because if he did, he would carry on with a lot of these schemes, but he just doesn't. Which tells me that he's not going to do the interventions needed, which means more people are going to live in this country with extreme poverty, amongst other things, and will struggle a lot. And the most frustrating thing is that we are still potentially years away from a general election, so people are going to suffer a lot in this country. But anyways, they keep threatening a windfall tax on energy companies. It's not going to happen, but I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Shouts out to the human hand grenade. Just to kind of add to the video, because I forgot to mention this bit in some tweets, which is Peter Foster, normally writes in the FT, saying and more briefings against the knucklehead at Liz Truss, saying Boris Johnson's call with Micheal Martin was conciliatory. Seriously, not what the official number 10 readout sounded like, saying, "Come here, old friend, let me put this gun to your temple, it's for the best." It's essentially what the Tories feel like they're trying to do to Ireland specifically, and also the EU, which is threaten them with blowing up a hole in the single market, really. And that's not how you build friendships or allies, but that'll go to the end of the video. Support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.